Well, again, everybody, and welcome to the Mike Francesa podcast on the Bet Rivers Network, brought to you by Casamigos Tequila. Casamigos Tequila is brought to you by those who drink it on this Football Friday for Week 17. I hope everybody had a very happy holidays, very Merry Christmas. I'll come to you on the Mike Francesa channel on the Bet Rivers Network on YouTube. Now, we've already had games, the two on Christmas, where we got what we expected. The Chiefs rolling over Pittsburgh, looking good doing it. I think looking better out of that funk they were in where they kept winning, but now starting to play better, getting more defined roles. Hollywood Brown making Worthy's role exactly what they had hoped it'd be all year, and now the utilization of Worthy's being more impressive. The move of the tackles to a more solid situation by moving, a premier player and premier guard to tackle. Um, and they win without Jones in the lineup. Win going away, really make Pitt look bad. And then the Ravens embarrass Houston. I have been telling you for weeks, Houston's going to the playoffs. They're winning their division. They are going to be the 4 seed. They're locked into the 4 seed. They are going to be a very quick out in the playoffs. I've said it here for about a month. They are not a good team. And the quarterback has taken a huge step back because he has no protection. He's lost key wide receivers. No question about that. He's lost key targets, but the offensive line is awful. And you saw how they were embarrassed in the running game. You saw what both Jackson and Henry did. I mean, just putting on a show in a game where they called the dogs off early. Well, that could have been a 50 spot. They could have put a 50 on Houston without even a blink. How about Jackson saying when he scores on a 48-yard touchdown, I was jogging? I mean, how bad is that? I was jogging. I mean, it's as bad as it was. Then last night, I would say probably the worst football game played in the league this year. I mean, just pitiful. I mean, Chicago is so ineptly coached, they'd be in the same vein as the Jets. That's how badly they're coached. I mean, it's amazing to me that these interim coaches have no idea what they are doing. You put these guys in, and they don't have a clue. Now, that sideline communication, time management is what got their head coach fired. But they have no idea how to run a football team. It is scary. It really is. And Seattle did nothing last night, but got a gift win and stayed alive for the postseason. That's where we are. There's 3 games on Saturday this week as the NFL moves to Saturday. You have the Chargers and the Pats. The Chargers with a win are in the playoffs. You have the Broncos and the Bengals. Bengals trying to stay alive. They need help, but they have to keep winning. Broncos need one win or a variety of losses, but a one win and they're in. They have the Bengals this week. They have the Chiefs next week. The big break they get there is the Chiefs have nothing to play for next week. They've already locked up the one all the way through. And I got to figure Andy's going to give a lot of key guys rest next week because it's been a hard season. And he knows how to play that. And I know they're going to get a bye, but I still think he's going to give a lot of guys, any guy who's got any kind of issue is going to get a week off. So that's going to help the Broncos, who don't have to worry about it if they can win this week. And then the Cards and the Rams are on their way to a division title, and they are starting to look like a dangerous team. If they can protect the quarterback, they will score points because they are lethal at the skill positions, as we know. Those are the big games. So triple header on Saturday, and then not much on Sunday. 2 games jump out. Vikings and Packers. Now, remember, the Vikings can still be the 1 seed. They have gotten no respect all year despite their very, very good record. And if they beat the Packers and turn around and beat the Lions, they're the number 1 seed. They're not only the division champs, they're the number 1 seed. Lions will play Monday night against the Niners, who are out of it. They've already been eliminated. So they're just playing for pride. The Lions need a win or a Minnesota loss to lock up the division and the 1 seed. The Eagles need a win to lock up or a Washington loss to lock up the division. That will then lock up the 2 seed. I'll go over the playoffs with you in a minute. As far as what else is out there, the other game is the Sunday night game. Falcons at Washington. Now, Washington needs one more win to lock up a playoff spot. Okay? Now, in either of the last 2 games, Falcons right now are in the playoffs because they beat Tampa twice. So if they finish in a tie, and they're tied right now, they will go to the playoffs. Now, Tampa has Carolina, which is playing much better. Young has won back his job. He's the quarterback next year. He has played well lately. They are dangerous. They are playing much better football. That's a dangerous game for Tampa, which right now is not in the playoffs, but can still slip in and also could get the final spot, as can Seattle. Okay. And the Cowboys are still alive, but very remotely. Okay. They're in Washington. And we don't know if Hurts is playing. He's in the concussion protocol. Remember this about Dallas, though. Dallas has played well lately. They've won 4 of their last 5. Last 4 games, Cooper Rush has 9 touchdowns, 1 intercept. So he's played better. And they've been good on the road this year. So that's a dangerous game, especially in a rivalry game, a division game, very dangerous game. Okay. Now, there's a couple games that mean nothing. Raiders and Saints, Titans and Jags. Dolphins have, they're not going to playoffs. We know that. They're virtually eliminated or right on the brink. Bronco, and they're playing the Browns. So those are all about seeding. All about draft order and stuff like that. That's all there is for those games. There's really 2 big games on Sunday: Packers and Green Bay. And Green Bay is not going to win a division. They're in the playoffs. They're most likely going to be the 5. They are a very dangerous team. Very dangerous. I would not want to play them in the playoffs. They are going to be very tough. They're legitimately good. And I think I would count them. I think there's only 3 teams in the NFC that can go to the Super Bowl. I think it's the Lions, the Eagles, and I would put the Packers in there. I would not put the Vikings in there. I'm not a believer, but I would put the Packers in there. They're capable, especially now what they have with the running game with Jacobs. And remember, in playoff football, there is 2 things you have to have. Now, you need well balanced teams in all directions, but what you must be able to do is you have to be able to muster a fourth quarter pass rush. You can't win without fourth quarter pass rush because most of the times the games are going to be relatively close, and you have to be able to pressure the quarterback in the fourth quarter. He can't sit back there and play pitch and catch. The other thing you have to be able to do is you have to be able to run the ball with a lead. You have to be able to play a solid 4-minute game in the NFL in the postseason, which means when you have a lead, you've got to be able to stop throwing the ball and get first downs and work that clock so you don't turn around, go 3 and out, and punt the ball right back, because you're going to be in a position, if you're leading, where you have to run that clock out. You're not going to be up 30-0 most times. You're going to be in a tight 1-score game, and you have to be able to keep possession of that ball. Otherwise, it can cost you the game. The quarterbacks that are playing in the playoffs usually are going to be guys that can come back on you anytime they get a chance. And that's why you must have fourth quarter pass rush, and you must be able to run the football with a lead. And some teams can't do that. Packers can with Jacobs. He's the kind of guy who will get stronger as the game goes on. And you can give him 25 carries. He's that kind of back. And although Love still makes mistakes, he is a incredibly talented player and a very, very dangerous performer. And he was superb last year in the postseason. Elsewhere, locals, Jets at the Bills. Bills have locked everything up. They have nothing to play for. Whether they'll play hard or not against the Jets, we'll see. But they're going to be the 2 seed. We know that. Colts, they're alive, but they're not going to make the playoffs. They need the Chargers to lose both games to have any scenario at all, and I don't think that's going to happen. But Colts are very determined to finish 7-9 after that tough loss at Denver, because they should have beaten Denver. And if they did, they would be going to the playoffs. They have the Giants this week. And last week they ran for 335 yards. Taylor ran for 218. Taylor wants to finish the season strong because it was he who flipped the ball and really made the big mistake. They would have been up 2 touchdowns in the third quarter. Instead, they were up 1, and then they got outscored 24-0, making myriad of mistakes after that. And the coach said he's there, and they have Jacksonville last week, and they are very determined to finish with a winning record. So the Giants, who are going absolutely nowhere, will have a hard time stopping the Colts. And the Colts defense is not bad either. So there's two things. The Giants are going to have no chance of stopping Taylor and Richardson running the ball, especially behind that Colt offensive line. Okay. The Colts are just going to wipe it out. And then they'll make some plays just like all these other teams. I mean, Atlanta is a team that doesn't turn anybody over, doesn't harass anybody. And yet last week they got 2 touchdowns off the defense. That's how bad the Giants are right now. And Neighbors might not play. He's a game time decision. He has a couple of more injuries, including foot. And when you hear foot and toe, you know there's a chance he's not going to play now because those are real naggers. And in the cold weather, he probably, I think, where he is this year, he's already had numbers. He's already set some records. And, despite the fact it's inconsequential, he can take off, which I wouldn't be surprised if he does this week. Um, I have him in what we have a family fantasy league, and I'm in the championship, and I probably will wind up sitting him this week because I don't think he's going to do much even if he plays. And the Jets will see at the Bills, and again, the Bills have locked everything up. I mentioned the Cowboys and Eagles, Panthers and Bucks. Bucks have to win both and hope that the Falcons lose to the Redskins on Saturday on Sunday night. That's a good Sunday night game. I tell you something right now. Penix, he looked like a rookie a couple times against the Giants, but that was an easy game for him to come in and he knew they were going to run the ball well. He knew he was going to be able to have his play action throws. He knew he could basically stay ahead of the sticks all the way, and it was an easy game for him. If he goes up to Washington and wins this game, he already establishes himself. He establishes the Falcons. They go to the playoffs. They have a young quarterback, and their season is a success, even though it has been at times a brutal, brutal season and one where Raheem Morris has not distinguished himself as a head coach. I've been a fan of his. I thought he's had a terrible year as a head coach. He had a better team than this. This team should have been coasting into the playoffs. He made a lot of bad decisions. I told you the way he treated Cousins was terrible, and he was going to keep playing him. And I said, you can't. And then by the time, the game came around, he made the change because you cannot destroy your quarterback the way he did and then keep playing him. You can't not allow him to throw the ball down the field and then start him. I mean, you cannot, you have to show confidence. If you as a head coach don't show confidence in your quarterback, who's going to show confidence in him? They had to make the move to Penix, and now will that be a problem in the playoffs? Probably, yes. He's going to have 2 games under his belt if he goes to the playoffs, or 3 games under his belt. It's not enough, but you know what? It is what it is. They'll go to the playoffs, which they will like, and it will get him. An unusual guy. He's very good from the neck up. He's a little bit of a dart thrower, but you know what? I've always liked him, and he's very, very good from the neck up. He's very good in big games. He's got ability. I don't think there's any question about it. So that's where we are right now for this week. Now, just an idea. Listen, there's all kinds of little tiebreakers, and I'm not going to go into all of it because you won't remember it anyway, and there's a lot of crazy stuff. But here's the essence of what you're looking at, okay? AFC. Chiefs locked into the 1. Buffalo locked into the 2. With a win or a Pittsburgh loss, the Ravens are locked into the 3. They're going to be the 3. The 4 is going to be Houston. It already is. So the Ravens are 4. That takes care of the divisions. Now you got 5, 6, 7. Pitt's already in the playoffs. Most likely the 5. Chargers are in with a win. Denver's in with a win. That would be your 7 teams. So it would be Kansas City 1, Bills 2, Ravens 3, Texans 4, Pittsburgh 5, Chargers 6, Denver 7. That would be the AFC. NFC, Detroit is the number 1 seed with a win or a Minnesota loss. But remember this, if the Vikings beat Green Bay and then turn around and beat Detroit, they are not only the division champs, they are the number 1 seed. Eagles, a win or a Washington loss, they lock up the division, and that locks up the number 2. Eagles are going to be 2. Rams are going to be 3. They're in with a win. Falcons or Bucks will be 4. Falcons are even with them right now. They have to stay even with them or ahead of them. If they stay even with them, they beat them because they beat Tampa twice. Tampa has to finish ahead of Atlanta. The loser of that division still could be in the running for the last wild card, but unlikely. 5, Green Bay is already in. They're most likely going to be the 5. Washington needs 1 win to be the 6. And you have Seattle, the Bucks, and yes, the Cowboys, but the Cowboys need a miracle. So most likely it's going to be Seattle or the Bucks in that last spot. So Detroit 1, Eagles 2, most likely scenario. Detroit 1, Eagle 2, Ram 3, Falcons 4, or Tampa 4. Green Bay, Washington, and then probably Seattle in that last spot. That's your NFC postseason. Lions very banged up. They had 9 of their top 22 defensive players out with injuries. 9 of their top 22, including 3 or 4 of their best guys, including critical guys, 2 on the line, 1 a corner, a linebacker. They have lost incredible numbers, and now they've lost Montgomery for the season. Although Gibbs is very talented, he and Montgomery were a great tandem together. They still have the best offensive line in the league, led by right tackle Penei Sewell, who's the best offensive lineman in the sport. That's where we are, okay, as we head to Week 17. Now, in Week 18, you got a couple of possible division games, big games. If the Rams should have a lose this week to Arizona, you would have a matchup between Rams and Seattle for the division. That's if the Rams lose this week. Rams, I doubt, will lose to Arizona. The other game is big, and even bigger if Minnesota beats Green Bay this week. Because if Minnesota loses to Green Bay and Detroit wins on Monday night, that game's not for anything next week. But if Minnesota wins, that game is for the division title and the number 1 seed the final week. That will be the game. So for that to happen, we need Minnesota. It doesn't matter if Detroit wins or loses. It matters if Minnesota wins. If Green Bay beats Minnesota, there's no drama in that last game. If Minnesota wins against the Packers, then that game next week is a showdown for not only the division title, but the number 1 seed. Highly unusual to have that on the line in Week 18, but it will be. Remember, it's always divisional games late, but they've set up a classic one if the Vikings win this week. Elsewhere, there's not a lot that's going to be on the line. You know, you have right now, at this juncture, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams that have already clinched the playoffs. Kansas City, Buffalo, Houston, Baltimore, and Pitt, Detroit, Philly, Minnesota, and Green Bay. 9 teams have already clinched the playoffs. With wins this week, Atlanta, Washington, Chargers, Rams, and Denver can all clinch. So you could have everybody in before next weekend, which will leave no drama for last week. But you know that's not going to happen. There's going to be drama somewhere next week. Otherwise, you're going to have a very boring last week of the year. Or you're going to be playing for a seeding. And I'll tell you this, remember this always. They will kill each other for a playoff spot. They will not play hard for seeding. I just notice it forever. They will not play hard for seeding. You would think they will, but they won't. When they're in already, they will not kill each other for seeding. They just won't do it. And the bottom line is, in years past, especially recent years, home field has become less important. Teams in the old days, it was very hard to go on the road and win, especially against a number 1 seed. It's not the case anymore. It happens a lot. So, you know you're going to get some drama, but the chance for the big key is if Minnesota wins. And Atlanta and Tampa are going to be in games that matter going into next week. There's no way out of it. No matter what happens this weekend, there's still next week. Although they both play teams they're going to be heavily favored against next week. So that goes into it. But so you expect them both to win. So you expect it to be status quo. Atlanta needs to be even or ahead. That's what they need because even they win because they beat the Bucks twice. That's a huge advantage they have right now. So right now they're in the playoffs today. That was a big win for Seattle last night, even though it was a terrible, terrible game. 6-3. No scoring in the second half. I mean, just unbelievable. And I mean, the kid couldn't even get a pass off for the Bears. Every time he dropped back to pass, he got hit. Every time I gave up at how many times he got sacked. He got sacked at least I think eight times. He must have got hit on every single play. He could not drop back and run you know, a in cut or a classic out for, Keenan Allen last night, no matter what. He couldn't run a 15-yard, pass play last night. Not once could he drop back into a clean pocket and throw a regular pass down the field. It did not happen one time in the game. That's how brutal the offensive line was for the Bears last night. He wound up with, I think, 8 sacks. When you look at the numbers that he had for the game, I mean, just dreadful how bad it was last night. Really, I mean, and the weather was not. It was more just the fact that they just couldn't execute. The offenses couldn't execute. He wound up 16 for 28 for 122 yards. He was officially sacked 7 times. He must have been hit 20 times. He was running for his life the entire night. Allen wound up with 5 catches for 25 yards. I mean, he could not. One thing the kid has done is gotten the ball to the wide receivers all year. He could not get the ball down the field last night. That was it. I mean, he had one play to Moore that was 18. He had one play to Allen that was 16. That was it for the game. And that's how bad it was. And they weren't much better. I mean, Seattle finished with 260 yards, and the Bears finished with 179 yards of offense. It was just a brutal, brutal game. But you know what? Seattle takes it as this morning it's 30-0. Who cares? They won the game. That's all that matters. So you got 3 games tomorrow. Chargers and Pats. Chargers need a win. Broncos and Bengals. Both teams alive. Cards and Rams. Arizona's been eliminated. Rams can lock things up tomorrow. Okay. Now the Rams Seattle thing is one of those things that could come down to like a really, really crazy tiebreaker if Seattle beat the Rams next week. So I don't even want to get into all that stuff. Now, college football. I'm not going to discuss any of the other bowls. Rutgers lost a tight one yesterday. So many players aren't playing. I can't even get into it. I mean, look at the Syracuse game today. They are an 18-point favorite now because Washington has nobody, and Syracuse has their whole team. So Syracuse is supposed to win by like 100. The Navy-Oklahoma game interests me in that that's one of those games where Navy's got the whole team in. Oklahoma's got a quarter of a team. But Oklahoma's quarter of a team could be athletically much superior to Navy's whole team. So it makes it a very odd game. But that's what you get sometimes in bowls. That can be fascinating. But the big games, the 4 playoff games. I know there was some feeling last week, we didn't get any real drama. And the ratings weren't that good. Remember this. All 4 games were blowouts. If you looked at the attendance for the 4 games, the average attendance was probably, 90,000 for the 4 games. That's not the point, though. The ratings weren't as good because the first 2 games were against NFL games. They're not going to beat NFL games. But if you look at those ratings in context of the sports, the ratings were great. Now, this week, they're going to be tremendous because they're not up against anything, and they're going to be neutral field games and probably much more competitive. The 4 games last week, I told you the favorites were going to trounce in all 4 games, and they did. I like the favorites in every game. Now, this week, I think it's very different. You got 4 games. You have the one on New Year's Eve, and we'll get to them next week in depth. But you got the New Year's Eve game, which is in the Fiesta Bowl, and that's Penn State as an 11-point favorite over Boise, which is the classic underdog with the great back. Can the back against a team that's been a real impressive team, but from a lesser league, can they show up against Penn State? Hey, they're going to show up against the Penn State coaching, which is not good in big games. They're going to show up against the Penn State offense, which is shaky. The Penn State defense, though, it can be overwhelming. So that's going to be interesting to see whether Boise can handle that. The kid has to run for 200 yards for them to have any chance. Let's be honest. Now, you have Texas as a 14-point favorite over Arizona State. I think that game is going to be that is your first game on New Year's Day at 1 o'clock in the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. I think that game is going to be closer than you think. I think Arizona State, they don't have Texas's players. They are not a top 5 team, but they are playing very together, very confident football. I look for that game to be much closer than people think. I think that game could be a surprise. I don't think Arizona State will win it, but I think they're going to be in it all the way. I don't think Boise will hold up for 4 quarters against Penn State. I'll root for them. I don't think they will, though. I think Arizona State will. I think they're going to play surprisingly well. And then you got the 2 games that are obviously pretty much pick 'em affairs. Ohio State's a 2-point favorite over Oregon. They played a game that went right to the wire earlier this year. Oregon won. Both teams are capable of winning the national championship. As a matter of fact, the winner of this game it will probably be the favorite to win it all. So you have Ohio State and Oregon in a classic game, flip of a coin. And then you have Georgia, a 1.5-point favorite over Notre Dame. Georgia has obviously issues at quarterback. I think Notre Dame wins this game. As a 1.5-point underdog, I think they're going to be able to run it. I think their defense is together. I think Notre Dame is ready to win this game. I think they have enough passing and enough guile from the quarterback. They have a wonderful little receiver who I think will make a big difference for Notre Dame and in key spots to move the chains on key third downs, which is critical in this game. In this game, the most critical thing is being able to convert a 3rd and 5, a 3rd and 6. That will win that game. And I think Notre Dame's going to beat Georgia. I have great respect for Georgia, and I rarely have picked against them the last couple of years. I think Notre Dame's going to beat them. So I think Penn State's going to wear down Boise. I think Arizona State's going to play inside the 2 touchdowns against Texas. Gun to my head, I think Ohio State's going to beat Oregon. I think why? Because they're going to have the best player on the field in that wide receiver. It's the best player on the field. I think he's actually the best player in college football. And I think they're going to win a close game. And I think Notre Dame's going to beat Georgia in a very, very tight 2017, 2014, 23-20 kind of football game. We'll get more of those next week, but your setup is New Year's Eve if you don't go out. And hey, I haven't gone out on New Year's Eve in so many years, whether I'm here or in Florida. I don't go out on New Year's Eve ever. So I'll be looking forward to the Fiesta Bowl, which is 7:30. And then 3 games on New Year's Day. Texas at 1 o'clock against Arizona State, 5 o'clock in the Rose, of course. Ohio State, Oregon in that setting in Pasadena, and there is nothing like that setting. If you've never been there, it is one of the great settings in all of sport. There's not a bad seat in that building. It's a beautiful setting. It's great weather. It's beautiful in every way. The Rose Bowl is a special event, and it's one of those events that America watches. Everybody's home on New Year's Day, and at 5 o'clock, everybody has the Rose Bowl game on, no matter whether they're college football fans or not. They watch the Rose Bowl. And then you have at 8:30, 8:45, game probably won't kick off to 9 because the Rose Bowl takes 9 hours. Georgia and Notre Dame in New Orleans, which is a Notre Dame city. Okay, no, you're an SEC country, but that's a Notre Dame city, New Orleans. That's going to be a great game, really a great game. And I think a very defensive-minded game, but I think a game Notre Dame's going to win. I actually am surprised that Notre Dame hasn't kind of slid to being the favorite in that game. A little bit surprised there. Now, let me tell you about the NBA for a minute. We'll get to that. But prop packs. Check out the all new prop packs exclusively at Bet Rivers. Place a qualifying NBA same game parlay and you receive a prop pack. You will earn extra rewards from your player card based on the number of points that your player scores. You can open with rare cards that have big prizes right away, 10,000 in bonus right off the top. And remember, there's all different kinds of way to win. It's a great little way to play. Terms and conditions apply. See the Bet Rivers app for full details. Tear into the action for prop packs right now. And we've told you at the newsletter. What we're going to have on the newsletter this week is I'm going to do a review on the Dylan movie, The Complete Unknown, which I was dying to see and I went and saw yesterday. So I will chat about that. Um, and worth seeing. I will tell you that right now, but I'll get into the review on the newsletter podcast. Um, emails. Mike Francesa email at Gmail. Mike Francesa podcast at gmail.com. Let me get to a couple of emails here, see what's on your mind uh, as we move on. Um, Gleyber Torres to the Tigers. So the idea of him coming back and Chisholm going to third is over. Gleyber Torres to the Tigers. He wasn't a bad Yankee. I know he took a lot of grief. Really took a lot of grief, but you know what? He wasn't a bad player. He wasn't the smartest player. He was a terrible base runner. He had some gaps in the field, but I know he had some lack of hustle, but he wasn't. He was a good offensive player. He really was steady, and he was good in the postseason. Um, Otherwise, let me get to the emails and see where we are right here, see what's on your mind. Mike Francis podcast at gmail.com. Let's pop them up here. Here we go. Emails. There we go. All right, here we go. Audie. My friends and I are starting to notice that it is getting increasingly difficult to watch standalone NFL games. Is it because of watching the red zone, or you're noticing a significant decrease in talent? Number one, Audie, I can still watch a game by itself. You know, I love football. I can get into the game now. If it's 40-0, it's 40-0. You can't do anything about it. But otherwise, I can get into the game. I understand people have watched games differently. I notice it with my boys. They watch the red zone all day. A lot of it has to do with fantasy. That's a big factor. Now, the other big factor is a lot of guys, many NFL wagerers have taken to playing these same game parlays and dealing with players' individual stats, prop bets. This guy's going to be over this yardage. This guy's going to be over this many catches. This guy's going to throw this many touchdown passes. This guy's going to have this many sacks. This guy's going to have this many rushing yards, over or under. And a lot of guys have taken to playing that way, which is, again, individual looks that plays very much to the red channel. So everything has led to that kind of consumer ship of the NFL. And for youth, it is becoming a much bigger issue than the game itself. Very few regular wages where you're just betting the game. That's more for the older guys. So the red zone has become a way of life. There's no question. Brendan, do you think that Sauce Gardner's regression is a concern? Listen, I think there's a malaise over the entire team and such a lack of leadership and such a lack of coaching. You have to throw everything out the window, especially for the guys who are the core of that team, like Gardner, like Hall, like Wilson. You have to just cut them some breaks and understand they were in the wrong place at the wrong time this year. Sean, what is your response to LeBron James saying that he loves the NFL, but Christmas Day is our day? It's a strong proclamation from a legendary player at the end of his career. It is something the NBA needs, but let me explain this to you in simple terms. The NBA has been destroyed on Christmas Day by the NFL. Basically, completely. I'm sure Silva can't even turn the TV on. He's so upset about what the NFL has done to them. The NBA used to be on, we usually host Christmas Day. And I can tell you, the NBA would be on all day. The Knick game was on until the Chief game started. And then football was on through both games. Not one bit of NBA while the NFL was on. Anywhere in the house. Not one iota. Now, we did watch the end of the Knick game because it was good. And I'm happy for Bridges, who I like a lot. And he had a great game. And Wemby had a great game. And you know what? It was good the end of the Knick game. Although that game wasn't greatly played, but still, it was a little dramatic. And Hart making his hustle plays at the end and etc. But hey, people love the Knicks in this town, and they really do, and they'll be into the Knicks big time, especially when football's over. But the NFL is all powerful. Nothing can compete with it. If you were going to go to a boardroom and give them any TV product of any kind in the world, they would all fight over the NBA and the NFL. That's it. They would take the NFL over anything else because it is the single most important TV product in the world because it is live, unscripted, highly dramatic, highly entertaining, incredibly popular, with an ardent fan base of over 100 million people. Ardent, which means the average ardent fan spends at least 90 to 2 hours a week consuming NFL information. That makes you an ardent fan. There are over 100 million ardent NFL fans. Think of it this way: they would give you a free NBA final game, a free World Series game, a free any other sporting event you want. And if you lump them all together, they wouldn't do the rating of the pay game that the NFL would put up on, say, Peacock or Prime. Last year, 25 million people viewed that game. That was the playoff game that was subscription only, paying $5.99. Think about it. They wouldn't watch any of those events for free compared to paying for the NFL. That just tells you everything you need to know. Now, hey, gambling's the reason. Gambling's part of the reason. It's not the entire reason. The NFL has a perfect marriage with television. It's the sport that was made for the box. It's perfect. Replay is perfect for it. Everything about it works. There are reasons why the other sports don't work, but just understand that the NFL's popularity is so superior that there's nothing that can be done. So here you have Christmas Day. NBA has all these games up, and the NBA and the NFL just comes and blows it right out of the water. Nothing they can do. All they can do is hope the NFL has pity on them. That's it. They have no recourse. Zero. Robbie, after the year Sam Donald has had, should the Jets bring him back as their quarterback? No, I don't think he should. I do not. I think he has been handled with care. I think he has been handled well. I like Sam. If I'm Sam, I do everything I can to stay in Minnesota. Dwayne, why is John Gruden not talked about as a candidate for the Jets? Well, I don't know what John's status is with the league yet. You know, he burned a lot of bridges. He and the commissioner have a pretty good hate going. There's a lot of stuff that went on that wasn't pretty. Eventually, I thought John would come back and coach again. John's a good coach. Now, that doesn't mean he's automatic. And you know what? guys like him turn out to be very expensive, and usually they don't do what they're supposed to, which is win a Super Bowl. Listen, any guy who has won a Super Bowl and gone to another spot has never won a Super Bowl, ever. No one has done it. Mike Holmgren came the closest. He has not done it. Bill Parcells didn't do it. No one else did it. Zero. Now, guys have lost the Super Bowl, Shula, Vermeil, gone to other places and won the Super Bowl. But nobody has gone from a Super Bowl winning situation, be brought in and win a Super Bowl. So when you're paying a fortune for Parcells or Jimmy Johnson or Holmgren or Gruden or you name it, not one of them has ever stepped in and won a Super Bowl. So they've been expensive and they haven't won a title, not any of them. And most of the owners now want the next McVay. That's what they want. They want a coach who's young, who is offensive minded, who will relate and build me a good offensive team with a young quarterback, develop the quarterback, and be there for a while. That's what they want. That's why a guy like Ben Johnson will be very much in demand. Guys, there's other guys who will be in demand. I know Pete Carroll wants to coach again, but his age is going to hurt him. Age is going to hurt him. I told you the Jets missed the boat. When they jettisoned Salah, if they had brought in Pete with a new offensive coordinator to run that room and brought in Pete and left the interim head coach running the defense, they would have, I think, made the playoffs. I firmly believe that. And if I was the Jets, what I would do right now is I would do this. I can't hire the guy I want because I want Liam Cohen, but I don't want him yet. And I can't hire him to come as an offensive coordinator because he already is an offensive coordinator, and I'm not going to be able to get him. So I'd have to make him head coach to get him. What I would do is I would bring in I would keep Rodgers for next year. I would bring in a guy like Pete Carroll and tell him, Pete, you have 2 years to be the head coach. And I want you to bring a staff in. And I want you to have an eye towards having a guy on this staff you think can succeed you, preferably in the role of offensive coordinator. But I want you to build a staff. And I want you to win immediately with this team. I think the Jets are built that if they did some fine tuning, and I would bring Rodgers back. I've made that very clear. He's 24 touchdowns, 8 intercepts. He's had 5 drop touchdown passes and the most drops in the league at wide receiver. He hasn't been perfect, and he's played on a bad leg for a lot of this season. If he was on a staff that was extremely well coached, the offensive line was coached, and the running game was good, you cannot succeed in the red zone unless your running game works. And the Jet running game has not worked. And they're the worst short yardage team in the world, the worst fourth down team in the world. And they haven't been able to run the ball with authority all year, which is why he has had to get rid of the ball so quickly, which is why he has been inaccurate at times, because he has had to get rid of the ball all the times. He can't wait as long as he wants to wait because he doesn't have time to wait. And he's got to get rid of the ball early. So he's got to lead guys, and he's got to make connections and and sometimes those look like errant throws because he has to get rid of the ball because the offensive line's not working. And they have gotten into the red zone so many times this year and not performed. Why? Because they're terrible in fourth down. They're terrible in short yardage, and they're terrible in the red zone because their blocking is not coordinated. Their play calling is dreadful, and their running game stinks. And it's all because they're about as badly coached team as I've ever seen, although the Bears last night were close. The Bears last night, really, if I owned the team, I would say to the general manager, we couldn't find somebody who had an understanding of how to run a football game to run this team because the guy we put in charge, he didn't have an idea what to do. I mean, they were rudderless, absolutely rudderless. It was so comical. The fans were like holding their head because they're knowledgeable fans and they're saying, "What are we doing here?" Elementary stuff. You see that with the Jets every week. Elementary stuff that shouldn't even be a second thought. The Miami game, the game was over. And you lost it. It was over. The Dolphins knew it was over. And you still gave them a minute back. You can't make this up. It's like football insanity. You look at it and you say, are we serious here? I mean, it's just it's mismanagement on such a level. It's hard to just even digest. But I would keep Rodgers. Now, Rodgers made the comment, "Hey, I might get fired by a teenager. Go ask Woody." I don't think he wants to go out this way. But I want Rodgers to understand he's a quarterback. He's not running the team. Okay, there's a lot of stuff that has to be cleaned up there. The problem is the Jets never allow anything to be cleaned up because Woody owns the team, but he's a fool. He's always been a fool. He's a fool from a football standpoint. I don't know if he's a fool in everything he does. I only judge him from a football standpoint, and from a football standpoint, he's a complete fool. A rich fool, but a complete fool. The only thing he did right was he bought the team for $630 million, and now it's worth about $7 billion. But we all know the NFL was never going to be a bad investment. Al Davis told me in the 80s, he said, I was with him and Jimmy the Greek, they were very close. And Al said to me, "Mike, these franchises are going to be worth billions of dollars. You're going to see money in this league that you are not even going to understand." And you know what? He was 100% right, which he usually was. These franchises are going to be worth billions. Now they're all worth billions. As bad as they have screwed up the Carolina Panthers, if they went to sell them tomorrow, they'd cost $3 billion. The Giants are a mess. If you went to sell them right now, if the Maras decided they've had enough, and I'm sure the Samara family members would love to go that way, but I don't think John's ever going to allow that. But if they wanted to hop out of their half, they'd probably get $4 billion for their half. Woody'd probably get somewhere between $6.5 and to $7 billion for the team, and he paid $630 million for it 25 years ago. Now, if you had $630 million 25 years ago, you'd have to be a fool not to turn it into billions of dollars. I mean, it's pretty easy to do, but he turned it into $6 or $7 billion, so it was a heck of an investment. But money's never been an issue. Okay, when you're a fourth generation or fifth generation Johnson and Johnson here, it's not a problem. From a football standpoint, it's been a problem, and a big one. Now you hear about Vrabel for them. I know Liam Cohn's on their list. That's a guy I've been very high on. I don't know him from a hole in the wall. If he walked in the room, I wouldn't know him. But I've watched him run that offense this year. And despite the fact he does have McVay on his resume, which will help him, he doesn't have a glittering background. But I don't know how he'll interview. But I can tell you this, watching him run that offense, he has been ingenious with that offense this year. He's run that offense better than any team, any coach has run a unit in the league this year. He's gotten so much out of that offense. Done a superb job. And I know for a fact that his name is on the list. I know that for a fact because I checked. And I know the list that went into Woody, Liam Cohen's on it to be interviewed. And he will be a hot candidate. And Ben Johnson's going to have his pick of jobs. I know the Bears want him. I know the Raiders want him. I don't know what job he'll take, or maybe he won't even take one. Maybe he'll try to win a Super Bowl with the Lions before he goes. And he'll wait for the job he wants. The most important thing Ben Johnson has to do, if Ben Johnson has been smart and learned anything these last couple of years, what he should have been doing was figuring out who was his staff, because that's the make or break thing now. It is impossible. I hear that from everybody I talk to. It's impossible to get a good staff now. And without a good staff, you look at some of the staffs that Parcells had. He had guys who sometimes he had a staff. You had 7 guys on one staff who were NFL head coaches. 7 guys. Think of a staff like that. 7 guys who at one time or another were NFL head coaches. That's crazy. We'll see you later.